Kick ass. Okay. What's it called?
It's called Booty.
Okay. You can tell we didn't pre-interview that.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Chop and Brew. This is Chip Walton. I am here with a very festive and Carnivalesque grand finale to our Mardi Gras Madness mini-series, in which we taste and talk our way through 3 wonderful Mardi Gras themed beers from Zony Mash Beer Project in New Orleans with brewer owner Mitch Grittman. And with each one of these brews, you're going to get some epic pro tips from Mitch that you can bring into your home brewery as you brew these very unique styles of beer. Starting with Zony Pop Hurricane Spiked Seltzer. We'll talk about the challenges of fermenting cane sugar water and how a career in food science plus a tour at Smoothie King of all places set Mitch up for success in the spiked seltzer game. That experience also paid off with our second beer, the Mystic Brewe of Mardi Gras, a hurricane-inspired fruited imperial sour co-pitched with Lactobacillus and Kveik. We'll dive into fermentation and the flavors that went into this super fruited beer. And the climax of our flight is a dark, decadent, dessert-like pastry stout fit for a king King Cake Imperial Stout, that is. We talk about the throwback king cake flavors that Mitch captured in this brew and why double mashing was pretty much the way to go with brewing a beer this big. I do hope you'll watch and enjoy the full tasting notes and interview, but if you're more interested in one of these brews over the others, I'll include the chapters in the YouTube video description and you can skip straight ahead. Mitch was also kind enough to give us homebrew scale recipes for the Mystic Brewe of Mardi Gras and King Cake Imperial Stout. You'll find those links in the video description as well. Before we get this parade rolling, a quick reminder that all Chop and Brew Pro Tips episodes are brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast and their full portfolio of strains for both home and pro brewers. And the crew of Chop and Brew over at Patreon. They are the baby in our king cake, making us feel like royalty every day of the year. Join them in supporting the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew.
All right, everybody, we are here for an incredible, festive, celebratory flight of beer with Mitch Grittman, who is down in New Orleans. I'm here in St. Paul. It's ironic because Mitch is from Minnesota and I'm from the Gulf Coast. Now he's on the Gulf Coast. I'm stuck where it's frozen tundra. So it's like we did a Freaky Friday thing with our brewing and living. Mitch, thank you so much for taking this time out during a really busy season. Cheers, brother.
Oh, yeah. Happy to.
So we agreed beforehand the flight that we would do in order is the Zony Pop, then the Mystic Brewe of Mardi Gras, then the King Cake Imperial Pastry Stout. So let's start. Let's just dig into it. And maybe as we taste these, we'll also share a little bit about what Zony Mash even is. But yeah, what are we drinking when we have the Zony Pop?
Zony Pop is it's a hard seltzer, fermented seltzer. We've been open for 2.5 years now. And I feel like it was right about at the time when seltzers were really starting to become popular. And I was like, all right, well, I want to try and figure out how to make that. I know that there's a lot of other brewers and breweries, especially kind of in this area and probably everywhere else, who are like, nah, fuck seltzers, that's not beer, only make beer. We only drink beer. And I'm, I only really drink beer, but also I like a challenge. I like figuring things out, and figuring out Zony Pop and the seltzers was actually probably one of the most challenging things that I've ever tried to kind of dial in on, because the yeast is not happy, the fermentation doesn't go right, everything is completely different from the way that you would make or brew a beer. And it was a series of a couple of failed attempts at essentially trying to ferment sugar water, which has no nutrients, no vitamins, no minerals, no pH buffering, nothing. And then when you're done, you end up with something that's actually kind of a milky looking mess more than anything. And so this was, like I said, about 2.5 years ago. It was before Omega came out with their seltzer nutrient blend. It was before the Brewers Association put out their seltzer making book. It was, so I basically just kind of trialed and errored it in order to figure out how to make something that was essentially flavorless but fully fermented and not sweet. No carbs, no residual sugar, and it took me a couple of tries, but afterwards I was like, nah, I got it. And that's a satisfying feeling. When you're trying to ferment something or come up with a product. So when we were coming up with or coming up to the Mardi Gras season, we knew after the kind of the agreement with King Cake Hub, we wanted to do a King Cake Stout. We wanted to rebrew the Mystic Brew because it was a fantastic beer. And then, we felt like we need a third thing to go along with it. Parades, Mardi Gras, seltzer just makes sense when you're out on the parade route. It's low ABV, it's clean, it's easy to drink. We gotta have a Mardi Gras seltzer. Bounced around a couple of different ideas, but really, kind of the hurricane flavor. I'm a big passion fruit fan. I love passion fruit. I love the kind of the hurricane, flavor as a whole, and so it kind of beat out the other flavors that we had put together, doing kind of tabletop tastings and what have you. I start with a cane sugar base, right? 100% cane sugar, water, and then enough nutrients to carry the fermentation. And then this one has passion fruit juice, and then cherry, passion fruit. We have some rum extracts, and then lime, lemon.
It's a mouthful, and it doesn't really even taste like a seltzer, for better or for worse. It really kind of almost tastes like a session tart, or a session kind of like fruited sour, but not nearly what we'll get into with Mystic Brew. Like, I thought this was quite lovely.
Thank you. Part of my background before I started the brewery is in product development, in food science. So right before we opened the brewery, I was working for Smoothie King. And so like dealing with fruits and fruit essence and fruit extracts and fruit flavors is something that I've got, at this point, probably over 10 years of experience dealing with. So it's not a jug that you buy at the homebrew store. It's I developed the flavor that goes into the seltzer from scratch.
The cane sugar base is also interesting because you hear a lot of just like dextrose, or like people are like, I love that like seltzer got to a point in the craft beer argument and nerdery that people are like, no, it's got to be half dextrose and half sucrose, like people used to say half two-row and half Marisati. It's like,
right,
what is happening here?
Well, yeast will ferment dextrose way better than it will ferment cane sugar, but obviously being in Louisiana here, I kind of put my foot down from the start, and I was like, I'm going to figure out how to make it 100% cane sugar because, that's our crop down here.
Well, let's kind of segue that into the second beverage that we have, which is Mystic Brew of Mardi Gras, which is also hurricane influence, correct? This is kind of a imperial fruited sour inspired by the best parts of a hurricane cocktail?
Yep. So this was actually not my idea. Good friend of mine who was working at J. Wakefield at the time approached us about doing a hurricane sour for Mardi Gras last year, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I again, shared the recipe with you. Passion fruit juice, cherry, tangerine, lime, or lemon. I know that Jay Wakefield did all of the oak spirals and whatnot, but that sounded like a nightmare to me.
So we're going to share a homebrew scale version of this. So we don't need to go deep to it, but it's some 2-row wheat, a lot of flaked things, oats and wheat, lots of rice hulls, which I love. But I like to see that there's the fruit influences like through the whirlpool and through secondary. So it seems like a very fun beer to brew, and that you have some lemon peel and juice in whirlpool, more juice in secondary. I'm interested. So the lacto blend is from Omega is kind of like a kettle souring, and then Hornindal is the clean fermenter.
So I don't kettle sour.
Okay.
I do co-fermentation across the board. I'll get essentially for a 15 barrel batch, I'll get 10 liters of the lacto blend. Push the beer into the tank, hit it with the lacto blend at about 100 degrees. Once that temp drops down to 90, which is usually overnight, then I'll hit it with the Hornindal, and then co-ferment to terminal gravity.
Because I know someone will ask, is there any other consideration you take in for like pH on the way in for that? Or is it the same that you would do if you were doing these in 2 different day-long stretches or whatever?
Yeah, so I'll do a little bit of pH modification on knockout to make sure that I'm below 4.8, which isn't too far out of the range of from mash to boil. But primary reason for that is for head retention, and then on that first pitch, kind of making sure below 4.8 you're not going to have much spoilage if there is a potential chance for spoilage. So I repitch my yeast, right? So after I brew the first tank, I'll use that slurry of lacto and Hornindal for up to 8 to 10 generations. Pull off the cone and reuse. Yep.
Oh wow.
And it'll always hit pH, the pH that I'm aiming for, because lacto and especially the Omega lacto blend, most lacto will only produce lactic acid to a certain point, and then it'll be like, it's too sour, we're gonna quit. So it's rare that I get below 3.2 after fermentation is complete, and I'll have some beers depending on the fruit and depending on everything else that'll be more like 3.4, 3.5. And that's just letting the lacto live. Lacto's not gonna screw anything else up unless you're making fruit or something.
I've had it last year. As soon as I tasted this year's, it took me back to last year's. I remember it. I was just like, yeah, it might be one of the most dense flavor of a fruited sour. This sounds bad, but I don't think it is. Like, for someone that grew up in like the 90s like myself, when V8 Splashes came out with the mangoes and this reminds me of like a grown-up V8 Splash, both in like viscosity, density, but it's not gross. It's not like the pictures you see where somebody's glass is just overflowing with pulp. I mean,
with pulp,
clear and light, but it's got such a rich fruit flavor.
I've made a couple of really pulpy beers, but I hate that. It's not enjoyable to me. It's novel, It's fun every now and again, but for me, it still needs to be a liquid that you can drink and enjoy, and especially if you drink this today versus a month or 2 months from now, you don't want to have a half a can of clear liquid and a half a can of like real dense sludge. I feel like we've really dialed in how to get the fruit in and how to get a good hectic haze without a pulpy haze, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is that part of the strategy of that Whirlpool secondary kind of handling of the fruit, or really more of something completely unrelated?
No, it's more secondary of the way that we actually hook a pump up to the tank after we add the fruit and spin it through the arm to actually get a really good mix. That agitation helps set the hectic haze, and then the pulp will settle out, but that haze and that fruit will still stay in. And I'll do that for up to 6 to 8 hours after we add the fruit, just to kind of really set it. So you can do it at home by shaking your carboy or something, but which is how I was used to doing it as a home brewer, and it took me a little bit to kind of figure out how to do it in a 500-gallon tank.
Well, I'm not trying to rush you along. I mean, you're in your home base. You got all night. I'm going to move us to the third beer, and the reason why I even contacted you, my friend Abby, who's an avid NOLA fan, such as myself, up here, she was just like showed me the Instagram post for this beer.
This is actually a prop. We sold out of the King Cake again, so I'm getting a draft for it.
Okay. Well, so anyway, this is how this all kind of started. So I appreciate you sending these. So tell me, so this is like the big boy in your trifecta of Mardi Gras beers, right?
Yep. The whole conversation came about when we kind of came to seal the deal with King Cake Hub. King Cake Hub is a local retailer, kind of a pop-up store. King Cake Hub came to us and they were like, "Oh, do you have space?" And we've got tons of space. They ended up popping up here, and the conversation immediately went to, okay, well, let's make a stout, King Cake Stout.
And the idea, real quick, before I get to that, like Matt Haynes was talking about a little bit, but basically this is a pop-up. You can think of them as a distributor of craft king cakes.
Yeah.
And you are the bottle shop space for said king cakes from all over New Orleans, maybe even a little outside of New Orleans. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Once you decide you're going to make a king cake stout and you don't want it to just be something that says king cake on the label, like how did you get to these flavors? Because I will tell you, this beer has so many fun flavors going on in it that just, I don't know, it's super fun. So yeah, talk me through it.
My goal was to not just make a cinnamon stout. In my experience, putting baked goods in the mash or in the boil or what have you still only has a real limited impact on the beer by the time it gets to your glass. So my goal was to kind of not necessarily just like, oh, give me all your old day old shitty king cakes and I'll throw them into the mash and we'll see what happens. But to kind of play on the stouts or pastry stout that I made previously and kind of lean into really just making a stout that was reminiscent of king cake as opposed to just kind of having the Instagram shot of throwing king cakes in the kettle.
So cinnamon, vanilla, and almond are kind of like the key players, right?
Yep. We got a little place called International Market in Metairie, which is loaded with kind of like bulk Indian and Mediterranean spices. So I got some real Indian cinnamon sticks. It's about 18 pounds, I think, per 15 barrel batch. And I sat there with a pliers and crunched every single one of those sticks and put them into a bag. I put half into the whirlpool and I put half into the fermenter. And the entire place smelled like a cookie factory for weeks. And then I like to use a vanilla bean paste, which is, not vanilla beans, but the scrapings of the inside kind of mixed with a little bit of vanilla extract to make it a pliable paste. It's just easier to work with. And I use about a gallon per tank of vanilla bean paste. It's expensive,
Yeah.
but I mean, by the time you factor it all in, it's less than hops.
And it's Mardi Gras.
So, right, exactly.
What's a little bit of frosting on the cake, man?
Right.
And the almond is an extract. We'll post this. Listen to me sounding all Minnesotan. We'll post this recipe.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to pass along on this beer, dude, you'll appreciate this being a Minnesota State Fair kid. Like the second my wife and I split this, I was like dark chocolate frosted cinnamon roll. And she was like hot roasted cinnamon almonds at the state fair in the paper cone on the street, walking around. And I'm also reading this like 1947 history of Mardi Gras. And the guy talks a lot about these like Creole hot dog vendors and the roasted nut guy with the little cart. And I was like, oh, I don't even know if Mitch will know that this like is generations of reference. Yeah, it's like I get a little bit of this like peanut buttery, like the dry roasted part that's probably from that almond, and then just like king cake with dark chocolate icing, which I've never had, but this makes me imagine what that's like.
King Cake Hub does have a dark chocolate king cake. Yeah, my goal was to really try and get the almond across, because I feel like the history of king cake is not cinnamon, it's actually almond. The galette de roi, which is the French pastry that the king cake was based on, is an almond kind of marzipan pastry. So I really wanted to try and make sure that almond was one of the main flavors that came along with it.
That's really cool. That's like deep cuts of king cake flavors. So your starting gravity is 1120, up here with like big old meads almost. You got maltodextrin, lactose, Brewers crystals, which aren't going to ferment out. So what does it kind of end at?
So I was doing the math in my head, and I think it finishes around 1040, 1044.
That's what blew me away when I first started learning about these about a year ago. It was like 1035 to 1040, 1040 plus. But there's still so much alcohol because it started so high. So if I can nerd out for a minute, do you double mash, or do you just like suck it up and get lower volume for this specific beer?
I tried sucking it up a number of times, but for the King Cake Stout, I double mashed this time, and I'm gonna double mash every single time from now on, because you make a what would that be, 1060 work, which is easy, no problem. Rep, and then basically push that back into the mash tun with the second half of your grain, and then you get something that's just pure syrup.
So you're using the first runnings as the mash water for the second batch.
Correct.
Okay, that's what gets confusing, because sometimes people mean double mashing, like I just mashed twice into a kettle, and it's so
that would be, to me, like I don't have enough room in my mash tun, right? So I mash this amount and then I mash again. But no, I use the first mash liquid, the wort from the first mash, in order to mash in the second half of the grain. It's a long day.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, just kind of, you have this Mardi Gras beers, like as a kind of an expat, I guess, of sorts, or not born and raised in New Orleans, but like, what's the vibe that you get around this time of year? I know I get homesick as hell around this time of year, but then also now that you've had this brewery, granted during these like kind of weird times, what's kind of the vibe as like the brewing community goes into Mardi Gras, not just the King Cake people and the people that do the balls and whatnot.
Yeah, this year is nuts. I mean,
it's like the rebound, right?
Oh yeah. Last year we all had to kind of like, oh, can we even go outside? And they had the house floats, which I feel like it was super cool, and a lot of people have kind of kept it going. But yeah, we're all ready to go into the street and get drunk and act like fools. Crew de Vue last week, Chewbacca's the week before. Like it was, oh, I can't explain it.
So then what about the brewing community as a whole, as you like cross New Year's and you start staring Mardi Gras in the face? Like, it seems like from the last couple of years of what people have sent me from down there, there's some like really fun, innovative beers. Is it kind of getting to be this like, Oktoberfest, is a very beer season? Are you feeling like Mardi Gras is becoming as much a beer season as is like a social and a culinary kind of season?
Yeah, I do. We're not the only people to come out with Mardi Gras seasonals. I feel like everybody's doing it. This is the time of year that I live for, just from a personal standpoint, and quite frankly, all of the work has been done up until this point. So now it's time to have fun.
Yeah, especially now that we're like less than 2 weeks out.
Oh yeah.
So Mitch, cheers. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sending this trio of beers. It was a very unexpected surprise to get like all three. You're gonna also unexpectedly help us out and hook us up with the recipes for Mystic Brew of Mardi Gras, King Cake Imperial Stout for the people. Maybe in 2023, you'll hear from a lot of people that need really technical advice. And yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time out. You stayed late at work. It looks like a really tough place to stay late, though, by the way.
Yeah, no, I never hang out here.